Okay, we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Bruce, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we've got a public hearing first on the COPS hiring program grant. And so, in the ballpark here?
Chief Smith is here.
Okay. Chief, would you...
I was notified in September, that the police department was awarded a COPS grant. This was actually, we submitted the grant back in June, and the focus on the grant was to start recuperating some of the positions that the department has lost since 2008, which is three patrol positions, which is roughly, at that time, 27% of our patrol staff. The grant focus is patrol. However, the federal government always wants us to be able to utilize our money in a very efficient, effective way. COPS is part of community policing, so the focus was in several different areas, primarily school resource officers. This particular award does not involve a school resource officer. This individual would be specializing in mental health training and be a part of a crisis intervention team and train the other officers on how to deal with individuals suffering from mental health. Littleton is a unique community because we are a hub community. We have, I'd say, higher proportion of individuals suffering from mental illness because we provide the services here in town and at the hospital. As a result of that, the grant is a 75-25% matching fund. We're required to increase our share of the grant every year, the first 3 years, and then fully fund the position in the 4th year. The first 3 years of the grant, the funding is directly out of the police department budget with no increase. The 4th year, we would have to absorb, I believe it's $40,000 into the budget to fully fund. As part of the contract, we have to fully fund the position for the 4th year. If the leadership of the community decides that they don't want that individual position on the 5th year, then certainly they can elect to cut the funding for that. You have the grant in front of you.
Yeah, Paul, what happens if the decision makers in the town decide that they don't want to fund that position in the 3rd or the 4th year?
Well, it is contractual, and I don't have a legal answer for that, but it is a 4-year commitment that we would, as we have done in years past with other COPS grants. We had one other COPS grant that got funded a lot more than I think it was only a 3-year commitment on that one. I mean, ultimately, the federal government, as well as I do, we want a commitment from the community, and they would like at least the community to fully fund the position for 1 additional year beyond the 3rd year. So 4 years is our commitment to this. And obviously we're hoping that the economy is going to be better. Everything seems to be leading in that particular direction, but this would assist us in getting back on track with our loss in patrol staff.
Well, when you lost positions a few years ago, was this a function of one of those positions which you're proposing now?
One of the positions that was eliminated, I think originally had been funded through a COPS grant.
Was it in the mental health area primarily?
No,
wasn't.
no, that was for a school resource officer. Right. I believe the reason we were chosen for this award was because of our focus in the mental health area and the understanding that, you know, the way the system's set up now, as far as our correction system and how law enforcement responds to individuals with mental health just isn't working. Violent crime in the United States is actually going down, but our incarceration rate is going up. And our country leads the world in incarcerated individuals per capita, and that's above China. So the focus is to detect individuals at the street level that have mental illness and direct them to the right resources. And if they do get involved in the criminal justice system, again, to divert them into a program, alternative sentencing program, to help them be healthy and not make them part of the criminal justice system that is for people that we're afraid of, the actual individuals that are out there that we can't help.
Tell me, how would this impact our exposure in terms of liability when we're dealing with mental health cases in the field? Would that reduce it, do you think?
I believe it would. Again, this is a national shift. When we first started in the police academy, we had 4 hours of training out of our 12 weeks of basic training, so to speak, for mental health. They shifted it to 2 days worth, or 16 hours of training, and then we have to get additional training each year, additional mental health training. But it still doesn't help us with the core response, the responsibilities that we have as police officers when we deal with an individual. The Wall Street Journal last week had an article about police response to individuals dealing with mental illness and their lack of training leading to individuals being killed, officers being killed. And certainly that's the emphasis that we're trying to prevent those situations.
Okay, let's say in the last couple of years, how many, just generally, instances do you think you've had with individuals that have had mental health issues in the community? I mean, you know, for instance, dealing with, you know, disorderly person and, you know, property crimes, maybe, things like that. Do you have any kind of ballpark?
Years or days?
On a daily basis? Well, I mean, you're telling yourself.
And it's days. I mean, we deal with individuals, we put individuals into the court system that certainly had put people in there that certainly could have been diverted into using other resources so that they didn't commit a crime. Or understanding, like an officer trained in crisis intervention helps teach other officers how to identify an individual suffering from mental illness, and rather than escalating the situation and turning them into use of force situations, de-escalating them and diverting that person to the right resources.
Okay, so I have another question is, in terms of the utilization of our prosecutor and the time that she has to devote to these things, overall, do you see a significant savings in terms of man hours, both in the street?
It's kind of a loaded question.
Always.
I don't think that you're going to see immediate savings on the street, because we got to have a person out there that's has a higher level of training than we currently have, but also to train the other officers and continue that effort. It just doesn't stop with one class.
Right.
Where you see the savings is when these individuals are identified that have the illness and they're identified to go into alternative court systems, such as our mental health court that we have here in Littleton. We're the second court in Grafton County to get one. You're seeing the savings there because that person is not spending a year in jail. They're spending their time coming to court on a monthly basis and meeting with the team and meeting with the judge, and they're monitored as far as their treatment. And usually there's a co-occurring issue with drugs or alcohol with that mental health, so we have to get that individual healthy again, and recidivism is very low. So generally, if we keep arresting an individual with mental health, they're just going to keep going back into the corrections facility. So we got to pay the $27,000 a year to incarcerate them, where we're spending anywhere probably around $7,000 to $10,000 a year going to mental health court and trying to get that individual healthy again.
Okay, so overall, we're probably looking at a substantial cost savings down the line.
Down the line, yes.
Okay.
Related question, going back to the losing of some employees back when the cut occurred, and no one was specialized in this area, but now you're looking to specialize in this area. Are we committed to that? Let's say 9, 10 months, a year into this, you're seeing this not working out the way you thought. I know you need more investigative man-hours. Could
Yes, we
you
do.
change this position into an investigative, maybe not the person, but the time slot into an investigative area?
I don't believe so, and the reason why, and reading the contract is that, well, we'd have to, let me back up on that. We would have to get the permission of the federal government to do that. And the emphasis has to be on community-oriented problem solving. So if we can make that fit and the government agrees to it, yes, we can do that shift, but they have to agree to that.
So we are looking at a future commitment, at least 2 years down the line.
Margie?
When do you have to sign on to this?
Because of sequestration, they delayed the process a little bit, but I received an email, I think I forwarded it to the town manager last week. We had around 2 weeks to make a decision on the award and notify them whether we would accept it or not accept the award.
2 weeks from now? Or
Yes.
2 weeks from...
I believe,
So we have a little bit of time, we don't have to make a decision tonight?
I believe you have about 2 weeks from last, I don't know when I received that email, last Thursday.
I don't have a date.
What I'd like to suggest is if you could, give us some numbers in regard to interaction on the street and project out in a very conservative manner what the potential cost savings are down the line. Because ultimately, this all comes back to the voters, whether or not they accept it or
No,
not.
I understand that. I don't know if the system has a way of recording those numbers.
Okay.
Because I might not be able to identify somebody as having a mental illness. Perhaps the person that we train would, but
Okay.
the cost savings through mental health court, I could probably get you those numbers.
Okay.
But that depends on whether this individual is feeding or getting the other officers on board to send people into the court system.
Okay.
But right now, the Littleton court is only prepared to take 10 participants. But still, that's still a significant savings if you add up $27,000 per each person.
Well, that's the kind of thing we're looking at.
Right.
Okay.
And there's some other stuff that I'm looking for. And Paul, I hate to put you in the spot.
It's okay.
I understand that that you would like to get your patrol force back up to close to where it was before. Or I know that you're not happy with where it is, but I have a concern about making decisions about not just this year's budget in this forum, but for the next 4 years' budgets in this forum. So the numbers that I see here are that we can get $125,000 from this program in
That's
the grant money, but that is going to require that we obligate the town of Littleton to $115,000 and a little bit of change. And where we're just starting the budget process for this year, I mean, I at least would like to have gotten to the point, and I understand that we might not be able to do it in the time frame that we've got, but I at least would like to have been able to get to the point that we said, we want to add another person to the police patrol staff, and this is how we're gonna come up with the money to do that, before we say, I mean, do you see that it looks to me like we're sort of going into a budgeting procedure sort of backwards?
I understand that completely, and I understand, unfortunately, that's how the grants work. I mean, they don't give you a whole, the whole budgetary, if they had issued this like in January, it would be more timely, but they didn't.
So the numbers that I want to see, although I am interested in the numbers that Mike is asking about the difference in cost between if somebody misbehaves and gets picked up and has to go through the criminal justice system, what does it cost to the town versus what would it cost if we could get that same person into the mental health court. What I'm more interested in the next 2 weeks is to see some sort of, as the police chief responsible for for setting up the budget and proposing a budget to us for acceptance this year, or for recommendation to the people of the town this year. I'd like to see what's going to be the breakdown of this money, and
Okay.
how is that going to fit into the bottom line of the police budget this year?
Well, I can answer most of that right now. It's the fourth year that is the wild card, so to speak.
And it's
All-
more than the 240,000 that these two numbers add up to then.
Right, these numbers equate to the first 3 years.
Okay, so that's
And that money is already in the police budget, okay? We're funding a 34-hour a week position right now.
Is it possible for us to put the money, is it possible for us to put some of this grant money that we're going to be getting to offset our costs this year aside, so that in the fourth year, we don't hit a board that's not even, I mean, there won't be a single one of us on that board necessarily. 4 years from now, it'll be a completely different board that we will have obligated to something.
No, I certainly understand that. What I can tell you is that,
If we feel that, if we think in this town that it's important that we have somebody in that position, we should be willing to pay for it. We should be willing, if we can get a grant to help offset that
Right.
cost, that's great. But if we can do something practical and unusual, like fund a little bit more of what it will be over the next 3 years than what we would need to, if we were getting that grant money, if we can put some away, so in the fourth year, we still
Right.
have money to put toward that, so that it doesn't come as
The bubble.
a big surprise, right, a balloon payment, so to speak, on a board that's not even
That's-
voting on it.
right.
Okay.
And I certainly understand that, and that, like I had indicated, and you must not have gotten the entire grant.
No, there's
We just
just,
got,
no.
we got these
Because
2 pages.
the numbers are broken down the first 3 years.
No.
What our portion of the payment is, and we already have that number worked into the budget this year and would be in the default budget next year. So we have those funds available,
By this year, you mean our current year?
our
Or-
current year.
Okay.
So we were utilizing for the first 3 years current funding. If our budget didn't get cut, that amount, we could use current funding. It was the fourth year that there would be a bubble. And from my estimation, and I haven't worked the numbers, it would be around $45,000 would be the bubble. Above and beyond current funding for the fourth year. The good thing right now is that we basically are quote-unquote shovel-ready. We don't have to go out and recruit somebody, put somebody through the police academy, put somebody through the field training program, and equip that individual with all brand new equipment, because we have 3 individuals already in part-time status on the police department, of which at least 2 of them are interested if this was granted. So that's a good thing. We've never been in this position recently because we never had part-timers that were full-time certified that had been trained through us. Well, we did a long time ago, decades ago. And so that's another added incentive right now, is to keep the momentum going in that direction and not having to worry about training somebody and putting somebody through the police academy and being delayed on the project. But yeah, we can only project how much it is at the current levels and how much that bump will be in the fourth year. And then again, the town needs to each additional year, just like with any department, elect or vote to keep individuals funded. And that's just the reality of any.
But at that
full-time.
point, they can. I mean, at
Yeah.
that point, a vote can make that determination, whereas for the next 4 years, if we accept this grant,
contractual.
we're contractually obliged to do it.
Yes.
And so we might end up losing something else if the budget is cut for some other reason.
That's correct.
And ending up keeping that. And I absolutely am in favor of addressing people with mental illness in a way that's different than the way we treat, somebody who's just a ne'er-do-well, who's out misbehaving.
Mhm.
But this worries me a little bit, the length of time, the balloon in the fourth year. I mean, I feel like even if the police if we decide that that's an important enough thing to fund, then I would recommend that we you know, that we maybe add $5,000 or $10,000 to the budget in each of the next 3 years, so that we have the money to pay for the 4th year that we're going to be obliged to, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, now we have a work session coming up in the next week,
Yep, we haven't said it yet, but.
and we haven't set the date on it yet?
Correct.
Okay, so it gives you a little bit of time to put something together for us. You
Sure.
can check with Fred,
We can do that.
and he'll give you the time frame. You good?
I'm good.
Good?
This doesn't fit directly, but 35 years ago, I recruited a psychiatrist here at the town to work with, full-time to work with the doctors. He was coming off of an Air Force base, and I had a public health grant. And what it made, the impact it had on the other physicians in town is that it made them more efficient in terms of dealing with this issue. Now, this is, you know, a police officer who's trained in this area isn't the same thing as a psychiatrist, because it was primarily in the medication area and the consultation surrounding medication. But it clearly made it easier for everybody, because there was a person in place who had that expertise and that know-how. So the referrals were very specific, and I would expect some of that would work here. But on the other side, as Marty and Mike have said, this is a commitment that we're making perhaps to other people that won't be sitting at this table in 4 years, and so we have to help ourselves.
I certainly understand that. You know, I think that's why it's important. I wasn't involved in the previous grant process with the other cost position, but, you know, we're being open about this. We understand the budgetary restrictions, the problematic issues we've had with the economy, but this is certainly an opportunity that we have as a community to rebuild our department. You know, to lose 27% of your patrol force is huge, because we're a hub community, and we're very busy, and we deal with a lot of different issues that the communities around us don't deal with.
Okay, so if you get together with Fred, just a second. Bruce?
Well, I got a little bit of questions out of it. When a police department runs, who makes the decisions on what kind of a police department you run? I mean, I'm listening to Paul, and suddenly I'm looking at it that says this is what he wants. And if he retires, what happens with the next police department that comes in here within the next 4 years? It may not be run in the same manner. That's number one. I happen to, on my way up here, I counted the vacant commercial establishments that went from the town building down here to 21 vacant establishments on the basis of the economy. Now, this is just on commercial locations, period. And I think you'd find the same way if you looked around town based on the amount of vacant apartments there are too, as far as that goes. And there's a substantial amount, and they've had a lot of apartments that have been constructed. But mental health is certainly a problem, but consequently, if you look at our town and the services that are offered pertaining to what you have within here, and you got Grafton County, and we're paying those people down here, to what extent do we need to be doing it? You can't spend that money, anything other than what it's designated for. I'm not a big believer in these grants. A grant, in turn, is nothing coming out of one pocket to another pocket out of the thing on it. And to increase the size of what we need as far as police work, it depends on how somebody runs a police department as to what you're going to do. This may be his whim to what he wants to do, but if he retires, it doesn't mean the fact you're going to have the same thing.
Marty?
But Bruce, the fact of the matter is that there's no way to run a police department based on some average intent of police chiefs. I mean, you have to go with what as a community, we have a police chief, and presumably we have a police chief because we believe that that person is doing what we want them to do. And so, I mean, you sort of have to go with what your current police chief is recommending.
I understand it, and that's why he's coming in here dealing with it. But if you have a fire department, you have the town manager who controls what they're doing. I would assume that you'd have a town manager that has the same thing on what he says within his department heads and how, what they operate underneath. Because you've got the same thing if you got a highway department or anything else on it, within any community. And you gotta look at cost factors of what you're talking within your towns. And I believe the fact that there's a lot more places to get what he's looking at within our immediate area that are available within a surrounding area of what we have here, other than specifically the police department trying to expand on that to use our federal money. So I'm not a believer in grabbing all these grants. And certainly, there's a lot of busyness within the police department, I don't deny that, but you've got to be able to stop some of this stuff, taking it where it doesn't come from heaven, and I'll tell you that. This money in turn is coming from somebody else's, it's all of our pockets out of this thing. And I think you've got to be able to say, it's time to pull in your horns and look at it also on the basis of the economy of the town. Again, you got 21 vacant commercial stores in here, in this town, from the town building down to the meadow. That didn't even go up through Aplock at all. And I'm saying that, based on the economy, and how much debt we already got in the police department based on the buildings that we bought down there. You're carrying an awful load of money on just on one particular department. And I just think that you've got to be able to pull your horns back, and I'm just not in favor of going off on these things on a limb, because I think there's other avenues that you can take to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I have some comments also.
I'm having a problem remembering your name.
Oh, it's okay. There are some things that should worry us. One of the things is that we've got HUD and eventually the United Nations in three things that are trying to get into our communities.
Hold on just a second. Is this going to directly address this issue?
Yes, this is
Okay,
notes
I
from
don't want
this.
you to wander too far
Yeah.
afield.
We've got the regional planning commissions, the Granite State Foundation, and Common Cause coming in here. These are all HUD agencies. We're not going to be getting a Littleton cop. We're going to be getting a federal government cop. Everything, it was said that everything is leading up to a better economy, and that's just not so. I don't know where that information came from. Violent crime is down, yes. Incarceration is up. But incarceration is up because we have a lot of victims, we have a lot of crimes with no victims. So we've got to address that before we start addressing these other things. He said something about officers being killed. Actually, officers being killed are actually down. I've got statistics for that. What's up is innocent people being killed by police officers. That is up. I believe in teaching officers to de-escalate situations, but this should be something that they work on, and I'm definitely not for accepting a grant, especially with the federal government involved in it when we've already got them coming into our town in all three directions.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Brian, I remembered your name.
Great. Chief Smith's analysis as far as the mental health issue and your request for additional due diligence so that we have some empirical evidence behind it, I think is going to show that we do have a mental health problem in our community. We have a mental health court. That isn't anything new. We also have a dramatically increasing poverty growth in our community, and one of the drivers of poverty is many times is mental health issue. I think the key thing, if the grant gives the chief flexibility, is the term outreach. The ability to reach out and identify people before they become a problem is going to be a critical component of this. And I don't know how the grant is structured. That's what you guys are going to have to do with due diligence. But to reach out into the community, identify people, and help them so they don't commit the crime, there's some value to the community for that. And it's something that you seriously consider doing that. Now, I don't know whether the chief has the flexibility on that, or whether this is strictly a, where you respond to a problem rather than outreach and prevent it. The second thing is, Margie, I think what you're right on the money as far as the funding for the 4th year. And that's usually what ticks people off, is that you get a grant and then boom, you get a spike in your tax rate because you've had a grant and then you got to pay for the whole thing. There are ways that you can creatively, by being creative, you can address that ahead of time. For example, you could put a warrant article in requesting that the community set aside a certain amount of money that's left over surplus from the chief's budget. Put that aside so that money would be available for the 4th year. You can put it in a warrant article to take, which on other warrant articles, if there's some surplus left over, to help fund that. So I think your idea of anticipating to prevent the spike is certainly worth looking into. Now, you got a short window to address those things, and that's unfortunate to do, but there is a need out there, and the outreach component is a critical part of it, because we are a hub. We do have White Mountain Mental Health. We do provide services. Sometimes it's frustrating for us because we end up having more of a burden than other communities, but it doesn't do us any good to ignore it. And I think you really should do your due diligence. And I think what you guys are asking for empirical evidence is right on the money, and I would keep, make sure that you can document it and then develop a comprehensive plan. But not to explore it in detail, I think, would be a missed opportunity.
Okay, Brian, I'd ask if you could get together with the chief and kind of go over all that. Okay, thank you. Dan?
I'd like to make a comment on something that Brian said. He said that mental health problems are driving unemployment. I think it's just the opposite. When a person doesn't have work, that really affects them. And
Well, from my standpoint and my work in certain areas, and I won't get into any specifics, I think that it works both ways.
And he said that warrant articles to move surplus around, there should never be surplus in our budget. That means that money has been taken from the taxpayers that didn't need to be taken.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if we could just take a minute, I gotta grab some water. Okay. Yeah, I know. All right, so, appointments. Oh, hey, Jackie.
I'm gonna do it if you want.
Yes, why
I'm
don't
not
you
here
get
for an appointment.
Well, think of us as the dentist. Go ahead.
Oh,
Don't think of it as the dentist. Jackie, would you come up here, please? So for anybody who doesn't know it, Jackie is going to be retiring from the transfer station. And Jackie, we wanted to give you a certificate of appreciation for 16 years of dedication and contributions to the transfer station in the town of Littleton. We have this certificate that we've had made up for you. We're going to miss you, and we thank you very much for everything that you've done.
Turn this around. There you go. All right.
I thank you.
That's not a color you got at the transfer station, is it?
No. Well, that too.
There you go.
I thank everybody. It's been very enjoyable. I've had a lot of backing from the public, and it's been really good, and I thank you all.
We'll miss you, Jackie. Thank you. All right. And we have Michael Wright, the CEO of Kalex.
That's been rescheduled.
Rescheduled.
To November 14th.
November 14th.
Excuse me, 12th.
12th, okay, we got that right there.
Does he have it in his room?
I hope so. It's not.
Okay. And Dan, front and center. Okay. Thank you.
I only have a short time to say this, so if, I'm going to be talking fast, if you'll follow along with me, that'll help out. What follows are reflections after viewing the above meeting based on the following criteria that I use as my moral compass. It is immoral to initiate and use force against an innocent person. Morality requires that one treat others as one would like others to treat oneself. And every human being is a special, unique, sovereign individual, but not more special nor more unique than any other person. In the video, the committee talks of exploring different ways to finance the buildup of the Saranac Street area. That is, ways to use government money. One way is called tax-incurred financing, or TIF. They have realized that in order to trick the taxpayers to cushion the blow, they're going to have to try to sell tax-incurred financing, TIF, as part money stolen from the taxpayer, TIF, and part money freely given from the private sector. If this project is such a great project, then why wouldn't private entrepreneurs want to fund the whole project and capitalize on all of the profit that it will supposedly generate? Could it be that the proclaimed profits are not as realistic as one is led to believe? The guest speaker, government agent, was asked to give the committee ideas on what made his project so successful. The implication was that this government agent's projects were successful. Really? What criteria are given for that supposed success? His projects were done with property, that is money, that was stolen from the taxpayers. Has that stolen money been returned to the rightful owners with interest? That is what defines the term successful in the real world. My feeling is that success to this government agent means that something was built and then rented or sold, and property taxes are now collected on the venture, but that the initial millions of dollars stolen have not been returned, much less with interest. If that is the case, then at best, this was a tortured success. The government took money that did not belong to it, used that stolen money to buy and build, then rented or sold that property, and then collected money on the rentals, sales, and property taxes generated. Anyone could be successful operating like that. Face it, government has nothing to lose, even if it lost. Proposed ideas like these need to be stripped of the pseudonyms and euphemisms, the fancy words used to disguise by trickery a pet project, so it won't hurt the taxpayer victim so much. The government agent was a hammer that was looking at everything as a nail. He kept talking about spending money as if it was his money. Even the words he used to describe the money were euphemisms. He talked of, we went in and bought, and we built. He talks of how the cities, how innocent sounding is the pseudonym cities as opposed to the money stolen from the taxpayers. How the city's total investment in one area was $16.4 million, and on top of that, another $2.5 million on underground improvements. And he bragged of how by using the power of government had bought property out from under a private business that would have employed people and would not have stolen money from the people of the town to purchase the land and build the buildings. He also spoke of building a conference center. The city of San Diego in California, with a usable climate of 365 days a year, stole money from its taxpayers and built a stadium and conference center. Both of them are big money losers, a constant burden on the taxpayers. The mention of San Diego is only one example out of many examples of government's endless incompetence. And at the end of this, you'll see 10 of the most successful government projects. It's amazing that government agents, that is, ordinary people like you and me, except that the government agents have nothing to lose, believe that they can outguess private citizens who, if the private citizens invest their money unwisely, stand to lose all of their investment. It is definitely easier to spend someone else's money when you aren't held personally accountable. The agent said that one property that government procured was worth about $3 million in 1997, and now it's worth about $50 million in inflated Federal Reserve notes. Has the burden on the taxpayer been decreased 15 times in that 16-year span? What would you want to bet that the general taxes have continually gone up since the year of that $3 million evaluation? The question that begs to be asked is, why don't government agencies go in quest of private properties to invest all private money into these areas? Why doesn't government offer incentives to attract the private capital and keep its thieving hands out of the pockets of the people? And then the agent finally lets the cat out of the bag and says that the whole secret of TIF, tax incurred financing, is How many people struggling with paying taxes would like to thank him for giving advice on how to steal more of their money? I don't know of any. He says that there are only 2 things that the taxpayers need to know if this thing is going to work. So pay attention, you taxpayers. He likes the catchphrase, but for the creation of the TIF district, none of this stuff could happen. We're told that getting the community, especially those who are skeptical of government, can be incredibly tricky. Is he saying that those people in the community, would that be taxpayers, who are rightly skeptical of government need to be tricked into this scheme? And if they can be tricked, then the taxpayer community will like it and will no longer be skeptical? Thank goodness. It appears that in government's mind, skepticism of theft by government is bad. He tells the committee that it needs to demonstrate to the skeptics that, but for the creation of the TIF district and the public investment, read property, that is money stolen from the community, and the public investment that goes along with it, none of this good stuff would happen. We're told by this agent that the private sector will only do so much as long as they're making money at it. Do those of you listening to me understand what this government agent has said? Since government doesn't create jobs or products that make money, but instead just steals any money it wants from the taxpayer, that is the community, then government doesn't have to care about making money, as the majority of the people in the private sector do. Those of you in the private sector who have to make money, whether you are a small business owner or an employee of a small business, to put a roof over your family's head, food on your family's table, and clothes on the backs of your family, how crass are you in the private sector to be interested in making money? Too bad that, like government, you just can't steal what you want from your neighbors in the community. I've listened to people speak of this Riverside project not as a private sector endeavor that will produce jobs, but as a project that will increase the tax base. Government and people on public payrolls will certainly profit from an increase in the tax base, that is, an increase in theft, when asking for their yearly salary increases. Do private company employees get yearly salary increases? Will the property taxes of the people of Littleton be reduced when or if this project comes online? I sincerely, with all my heart, wish it would, but I sincerely, with all my heart, sadly do not believe it will. The agent then goes on to say that the community doesn't understand the basic economics of real estate, and that at a certain point the public aspirations are beyond the ability of the private sector to deliver. Really? And that this will be a hard thing for the taxpaying community to understand? Please note that these are all assumptions put forth by this agent. They are certainly not facts of which I am aware. Assumption number 1, public aspirations. While I can believe that some of the people of our community aspire to see this project go forward, even if it meant that all tax money, no private money, would be used, I am also not sure that the majority of the community would aspire for it if they knew that the money would have to be taken from them to pay for this. Assumption number 2, and not necessarily in this order, the community doesn't understand the basic economics of real estate. This may be true of most of us in the community, but one doesn't require a degree in the basic economics of real estate to be bothered by knowing that there are people, one's neighbors, who want to rob them in order to finance a pet project of theirs. And if the community cannot be tricked into understanding, well, the agent says, none of the grand plans that you, meaning the committee, the select board, and the supporters of the Riverside project, have will happen. Another thing the agent said that will be challenging for the taxpaying community to understand will be the corporate welfare / you're taking money away from the general fund and the school district. We're told that the two are kind of completely separate. Kind of completely? Huh? His experience is that members of the community, remember a pseudonym for taxpayers, might have a hard time understanding that. Really? You think? Could he really have meant that we might have a hard time being taken in by the false promises of a man, a government agent, who is willing to use trickery to front a project in which he has nothing to lose in such a venture? The agent rationalized this by saying that he felt that the new revenues coming in will offset this. Unfortunately, government almost always does not work that way. I will bet money that taxes will continue to go up each and every year. Do you want to bet money that it won't? Would the government agent be willing to put his own money on the line that whatever scheme is adopted, it will cause a reduction in taxes? How about a guarantee on that? You'd be a fool to believe that the agent will put any of his money on that happening. Would the Saranac Street area look better if this project went through? I think if everyone were shown before and after pictures of the area, they would overwhelmingly say yes. But I also believe that if all of the old, outdated, energy inefficient buildings throughout the town were torn down and nice, new, energy efficient buildings were built in their place, and then the older buildings still left standing were torn down because they no longer fit in with the look of the new place, that most residents would say that the new Littleton looked better than the old Littleton. But would 6,000 residents want to go in debt for the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, that faceless would cause them? If a minority of the community, that is those who actually will vote for passage of this redevelopment, and it will be a minority, votes to tax the majority of residents in order to pay for the project, this will cause the town to be indebted to the tune of millions of dollars that residents can no longer spend on their families' needs and wants. This amounts to a minority of the residents signing a contract that will cause the majority to suffer a loss in their property, a loss that will be reflected throughout the private businesses of Littleton, because that formerly discretionary money will no longer be available to spend. Some will say that this loss of spending will be offset by the new spending that will come about as a result of the redevelopment. Huh? What new spending? Do you mean if we build it, they will come? Unfortunately, in the real world, it ain't necessarily so. What is true is that the tax base will increase, but the taxpayers will still not have the money to spend that was stolen from them to finance the project. It is very doubtful that tourism will increase by any significant number over the amount that normally drive through the area, just because of a realignment of some streets and some new buildings added to the area. Many people would like to feel better, lose some weight, look younger with a little reconstructive surgery, have new clothes and a new car, live in a modern house. How many of you would like for someone to hire some goons with guns to come to your house to collect the money to pay for their new makeover? That is exactly what happens when taxes are taken from residents. Is anyone really aware of what could happen if someone could not or would not pay their property taxes for whatever reason, religious, financial, political, or whatever? One would eventually be served a notice of eviction. If the person feels that they are being treated unfairly, again for whatever reason, it still won't stop government agents with guns from evicting a family from their property. If one should resist this theft of their property, then one will be arrested. If one should resist being arrested, then one will be set upon and beaten. If one should resist the beating, one may very well be murdered. Government thugs carry those guns because, if need be, they will use them on anyone who resists them. Only when government goons murder someone, it is simply said that the individual was killed, not murdered. Another euphemism. This is the real story that is never told or even hinted at of what could happen to one's neighbor when one votes to raise taxes, that is, steal their property. Remember, money is property. None of this will be mentioned when you're tempted with platitudes, fantasies, and pretty pictures to approve the River District project. Remember also that they, the River District Committee, certain members of the Select Board, businesses that stand to gain from the venture, and those who will vote for passage, regardless of the hardship puts on their neighbors, would not have to go before you to trick you into going into debt if this were a project that were being considered solely by private enterprise. That is, people who were willing to gamble their own money, not yours. This all boils down to, do you believe that goods and services should be provided at the barrel of a gun? If your answer is yes, then your time has been wasted by this monologue. If your answer is a resounding no, then make your answer heard at the polls. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any comments? Okay, and your name?
Mary Jane Harley, I live on Main Street.
Okay.
I came to this town about a year ago. I selected it very carefully. It has many features, of course, which are very attractive to outsiders, as you well know. And recently I found something out which dovetails with what Dan has to say. It isn't direct. It's something that you don't know about yet that you should. Several weeks ago, when this country was undergoing a budget crisis, EBT cards were shut down temporarily. There was a glitch, and then there was a release by Fox 13 News of Utah of a letter from the USDA citing that a warning to all states that the SNAP program, the food stamp program, was due to shut down as of November 1st. Now, I don't know this didn't make the local news, and because I'm a bit of a sleuth, I called Utah and the Channel 13 to confirm it, and then I called our own government office, Mr. Maggie Hansen's office, to see if this was true, because I was concerned about what would happen here in New Hampshire, my adopted home, if such a thing happened. I live right on the corner of Jackson Street near a very well-visited by the police property where I'm sure there's quite a few people who depend on food stamps, and I believe that household would turn into a conflagration if something like that occurred. So I wanted to find out from our own government if indeed we received such a letter, and if so, what our government's planning to do about it. And I was told by a spokesperson at the governor's office that New Hampshire has a small amount of food set by for this emergency. We did indeed receive a letter, and that they're trying to put together a loose coalition with the private charities and current food pantries, and that local distribution would depend on you in the town level. I don't know if you've been informed of this yet. I might be the first person to tell you this. But if our state is making these kind of quiet preparations now, in these very perilous and uncertain times, it's very difficult for private residents to think that it's time for an illustrious development project. I myself am very concerned. I live in the city of Schenectady and I saw such a project occur, and what was created was a beautiful downtown, I have to admit, with a lot of gambling casinos and nightclubs and expensive restaurants. And as much as this does draw a certain, on a certain scale, it does draw people in, I don't think Littleton is the kind of town that could pull off something that large. Secondly, nor should it. And thirdly, in a failing economy, that type of disposable income is the first thing to go. So before this town considers such projects, they would be better able and perhaps wiser to address a pertinent mental health issue, which I can tell you as a street resident is very, very prominent in this town. And thirdly, just to caution all of you that you may very well be sitting at this table making some very, very different types of decisions this January if the budget doesn't pass or if there's a default on the dollar. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to citizens' concerns. Sounds like we've already heard a couple, so any others? Brian?
Couple of quick ones.
Sure.
In 1970, on April 22nd, Earth Day happened nationwide. Littleton participated. Over the next 22 years, we had sporadic activity, and then starting in 1992, for over the last 21 years, we've had more concentrated activity. Our activities for Earth Day have primarily been roadside pickup. The town has sponsored the activity. Larry Jackson, longtime head of Public Works, ran the Earth Day activities on site. Tony Alacqua was from the transfer station, was very active in reaching out to the community for Earth Week activities, and it was a great thing. What I would urge you to do, I've spoken with Margie and with Fred, is consider having Earth Day on Saturday, April 25th, and to have instead of roadside pickup, which we can incorporate in, would be to have an Ammonoosuc River shoreline cleanup effort. Many other towns on Earth Day pick a project and then work in a particular area. To date, the Rotary Club spent some time clearing out so to walk a better view of the river, and then a group, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, from Partridge Lake basically did some work in the area where the Saranac building burned down. So there's plenty of work to do, and we have a history of doing these things, and I'd urge you to consider doing that and then pulling the resources and volunteers to make this a good project. So just putting it on the table at this point. Mm-hmm. Second thing is, I'm standing in a building, you're sitting in a building that next year will have its 95th anniversary, the community house. It was purchased in 1919, and according to the plaque outside, the driving force was a $10,000 contribution from an attorney by the name of Daniel Remick, who now Remick Park is named after. As you know, the Community House Board, which I'm not a member of, has been struggling for the last 10 to 15 years to deal with some severe deferred maintenance here. George Mitchell was telling me that his committee, which is, I guess, the capital improvement plan, I may not be stating what it is, has identified that between this and the annex, there's approximately $350,000, and that's a number that's not locked in. They're still working, getting information of capital improvements that need to be done. The annex cannot be used now because of the floor. It needs a new foundation, the floor. This building has outdated heating, electrical, and a whole series of things. This community building has served our community for 95 years, and myself, I look upon the community house as no different than the library, the town building, the parks, the Dells, Kilburn Craigs. It's a special place. And I would urge that one of the selectmen reach out to partner with the community house board to come up with a plan so that by the time we hit the 100th anniversary, this building is put back into the shape that it deserves to be. I don't have any particulars on how that partnership should go or what should happen, but I certainly hope one of the selectmen will reach out on behalf of the other selectmen to work with them so that over the next 3 to 5 years, and they've been very aggressive. They've got a raffle, they've got an L-chip grant. They're not just sitting around their thumbs looking for somebody else to help, but this is a town jewel, and I think the more leadership the selectmen could provide to address the deferred maintenance on this building would be the best you can do.
Thank you. Okay. Eddie?
I'd like to thank the selectmen for doing what they've done here recently regarding the tax rate. We took an initiative to bring the tax rate down to a reasonable increase, which I understand is only a few cents, but I don't see that same thing happening at the school board level. As a matter of fact, it seems like they're closer to $1 than they are to 5 cents. And I feel that they don't really understand the value of the money that people come up with for paying taxes. It's not that easy. It's not getting better. Anybody says it's getting better, it's crazy. To me, it's the same and it's not getting worse. So I just want to reiterate, I want to thank you, Selectmen, for what you've done. And I don't want to thank the school board for not doing anything.
No comment.
Thank you.
All right, town manager's report. Oh, wait a minute, we got somebody here. Okay, Ron?
Yeah, I've got a couple of concerns.
Yep, go for it.
And I see a couple of items on the agenda that I'd like to comment on, because you may not be taking input at that point.
Sure.
So the first concern I have, or question I have, is a lot has been made about the tax base and the fact that it only went up $140,000 this year, something like that, which makes it sound like there's been no growth in this town whatsoever. But I am led to believe that that $140,000 is the net after whatever increases were realized, that those were decreased by losses in taxes, tax base on utilities. So if anybody has or can get me the figure on how much money we lost on abatements to utilities this year, I think it would give the public a better idea of what the actual growth in town is.
Right. Okay. Fred, you take care. Okay.
Okay, my second concern is that it's come to my attention recently that there is nothing in the Littleton zoning, and Eddie may be able to correct me, that prohibits the public from using town-owned land. I'm specifically referring to situations where there are roads, where the town, part of the property on either side of the road, 25 feet of either side of the midline, actually belongs to the town. There's nothing in the zoning that prevents people from putting up advertisements, political signs, directional signs on town-owned land. So unless I'm corrected on that, I'm just wondering if the board is aware of that, and if you're aware of that, is that of any concern to you?
I think when it comes to political signs that there's, I'm thinking of the state right-of-ways.
State right-of-way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the state has a regulation, ours say
Okay.
what can go and what cannot go.
Eddie?
Zoning controls private property, it does not control town property. Town property is controlled by the Board of Selectmen primarily, or whoever they designate it to. So there wouldn't be anything in the zoning ordinance that would control town property per se.
Well, it could be another ordinance, it could be a town ordinance.
It could be.
Or a policy, the select board policy
Right.
regarding usage of those strips of land along public ways.
Okay.
Well, it's that issue that concerns me, and perhaps if you would put that on your agenda and think about it sometime. Okay, regarding what's coming up on the agenda later, I see there's an item on the budget and the undesignated fund balance. I've sent you an email
Right.
about this, so this is primarily for the viewing public, but just a reminder, the town does have a policy on how much money should be retained at the end of the year. It's The aim is to retain between 5 and 8% of the retainage figure, which only Karen knows and can figure out. So I would like to know if, I mean, you probably can't do it tonight, what that 5% would be in...
You mean if it would be 5%?
Yeah, if we were to retain the 5% recommended by the state and that which is town policy, what that would come out to. And secondly, I would like to encourage you to try and come as close to that 5% as possible. As you're well aware, one of the values of having a decent fund balance is the cash flow situation. And the ability to get through that twice-a-year stressful period when we're running out of money, the tax bills haven't gone out, and you're looking at the potential of having to borrow money. So the policy does say that the board can make an exception to the policy, and if that's what you intend to do, I guess I'd like to hear the rationale for the exception, since it's been done now 2 or 3 years in a row. The second thing on the agenda that I would like to talk a little bit about, I hope that you will address these, has to do with the appointing an alternate member to the Budget Committee. Again, I sent an email on this. So I guess my questions on this are, why are we adding this position to a committee that I think is already too large to start with? What is the status of the membership right now? I understand there are 1 or 2 members that may not be able to participate this year, and that may be the reason driving the appointment of an alternate. And 2 other points on that is, has the school board been consulted on this proposal, since it is a school town budget committee? And lastly, it has been the practice over the last several years to advertise any openings on committees, and again, I would encourage you to continue to follow that policy. So hopefully you can address some of those points when we get to those items.
Okay. Town manager's report.
Okay, thank you. Well, since we were talking about the fund balance and retainage, why don't we jump onto that subject initially. At the last Selectmen's meeting at the Opera House, we went through a little exercise of looking at how those numbers might be factored. As a point of clarification, Karen developed this slide, which shows the total MS5 fund balance at 1.46 million. Of that, the adjusted unreserved fund balance is 856,000, okay? So that is the number with which the board has discretionary authority. And the policy talks about reserving a percentage of the overall budget. What we're estimating the overall budget, not knowing what the school bond amount might be, is about $19 million. So that's town, school, and county numbers. Town and county numbers from this year and school numbers from last year, since we haven't received any adjusted numbers from the school. So if you take 8% of that 19 million, you come up with 1.5 million. Clearly that's in excess of what we have as the 856. That's even in excess of the 5%. So what we have for a total unreserved fund balance is about 4.5%. What we had discussed was placing some number in the tax rate calculation, less than that 5%, and the 400,000 number was the highest number that we had discussed, which would then drop the unreserved fund balance to 2.1%. Karen, do you want to embellish on that?
It is recommended by GFOA to keep 8% in. Most towns do not keep 8% in. 5% is recommended by DRA. If you plan to use any of those funds for projects for next year that are in warrant articles, you may want to be concerned of how much you do use of the fund balance. And I do realize that there is a tax increase pending the school, and I have not got those numbers at this time. I understand that they are being approved through DRA, but I haven't heard whether they are or not yet. The 400,000 does bring that fund balance down by 2.1%, which is below 3. And it does affect whether we take TANs or not when we don't have the extra funds there.
Have we just taken a 10?
We haven't yet. I'm still postponing it as long as I can.
But the estimate for that, Karen, is what? What do we think we're gonna have to borrow, and what's the repayment on that?
The estimate of the interest on it, we do plan on repaying it within a month. The estimate interest is less than $500 on $750,000.
Yeah, we approved one last year, but we never took anything.
Right.
And we approved one again this year, and we haven't
Right.
yet taken one. I was curious about what the number would be if we had to take one out. What are we expecting to have to pay? The other question that I have is, does the school maintain some sort of fund balance to cover fluctuations in their budgets?
They have a right this year to retain some fund balance. I haven't heard whether they're going to turn everything over to reduce the tax rate, the school rate, or not.
I'm curious as to why the town would be retaining some, I mean, why is our number that we're supposed to retain based on the total amount, ours and the schools, if the school is additionally retaining some sort of a fund balance to help with their, I mean, it seems like it would make more sense, just from a practical standpoint, for the town to only have to reserve a fund balance that's related as a percentage to our town budget.
Well, this is the first year the school is able to retain a fund balance.
Yeah, single district and SAUs normally can't retain any money.
But they do somehow, don't they?
They encumber money.
They what?
They encumber money.
They can encumber, but they really can't hold an undefined balance. An SAU, multiple district SAU can, but we're a single district, so.
The town is responsible to collect all of the monies
Yeah,
that
I
are taxed
understand
out.
that.
And that's why it's counted in there.
And that's why it's counted in there. The school gets their money, the town may not get their money. So part of this fund balance, that $856,000, is also our receivables. It is an accounting number. It includes the receivables on taxes uncollected. The way that we would collect on the monies out there due to us is to take over the property. Tax money has been collected very efficiently by the tax collector at this point. The payments are coming in. We haven't billed for the second billing, but the payments have been coming in, no different than what they've come in the past, if not a little improvement.
Any questions?
Nope, that's all I have for now.
Nope. Brian?
Couple things. I was only a selectman for 1 year, and Eddie was 2 years after. We kind of had a working number of about $500,000 that we kept for retainage. And it was one of the reasons why we did that, was that this calculation is based upon no surplus occurring at the end of the fiscal year. In our history has been that there is $300,000 to $400,000 in that range, that between when the tax rate is set in the fiscal year, which usually many times is less than 2 months, is actually ends up being part of it. That's how you ended up with, at the end of 2012, 856. I think a year ago, your number was 500 and change, I think is what you set aside. So you ended up with 856, so you got about 350 that you ended up with surplus. So one of the reasons why towns don't do it is that they know there are two sources of surplus. There's the one that you roll over from the previous year, plus the one that you generated for your fiscal year. So the combination of those two, if you were to just say a number of either 300 or 350 with a 500,000 number, you would be between the 954 and the 760. So it isn't, you know, there are two sources that fund it. This, the way the DRA calculates it, they say there's no surplus. Well, practical experience indicates that there is. And that's where that's where your practical wisdom has to balance, basically, of taking both of those into consideration when it comes to helping offset taxes for the people to know what you're going to be able to do. So I hope when you make your final decision, you'll take that into consideration.
Brian, did you say the 500,000 would be between the 5% and 4%?
No. What I'm saying is that in 2012, at the end of the year, this was the number, 856, okay? And that was a composite of what the town voted, the selectmen voted a year ago for an undesignated fund.
Which was somewhere around 500,000.
500,000, and then what the surplus was for tax year 2012. So you add the two together, and then you come up with this number. And that's really the unfunded balance that you're rolling over for cash flow purposes for the next year. Then the next year you come along, say you only had 150. Then obviously you would make your adjustment based upon that number. But historically, and again, Eddie was a selectman for 3 years, we used the $500,000 number as a working number, which similar, it just happened to be that's what you guys did last year, because we took both numbers, added them in together, and it seemed to be a working number. As you have seen, you haven't had to use hands if you use that methodology. Now, should we go below 500,000? I don't think so. I think it's a good working number. It's got a lot of practical experience for the community, and I think it serves our needs. Plus, it also helps offset the taxes for the taxpayers.
As part of our retainage there is, that is for unanticipated expenses, equipment, infrastructure, and stuff like that. How up to date are we with our equipment?
Well, that really can only be used for emergencies, type of things, unbudgeted emergencies. Okay. So we will be talking about our needs for equipment during the budget process.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion?
Yeah, the school board has done some due diligence here in terms of trying to bring down its numbers. I mean, it was faced with a state shortfall. But no matter what they do, or what and possibly they can bring it down a little bit more, we're going to be facing 85 cents, 90 cents. And it's really out of their control in terms of why it's coming down this way. In looking at what we're going to have to try to do here to mitigate or to reduce and keep our tax rate at a minimum, because we have two big projects here. We have the river project to discuss, and we have the garage. That's two, and we have a labor contract will be coming up as well. So. Not that anybody criticizes the school board, but in defending what they're dealing with. They're dealing with out of district issues that they have no control over in terms of shortages of funds. But that's going to leave us with a tax increase on that side of it. I wish we didn't have to count their money as Margie was going to in terms of calculating our own rates here, but I guess we do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what I would think we could do at this point was perhaps schedule a work session on the budget so that we can go through where we're at.
Okay, why don't we wrap that all around so that we can have Paul come in and take care of the work on his part.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike, just like a
Yes, go ahead.
follow-up, since you did allow me comments, I'd like to comment on Mr. Moore's comment that the school board has done nothing. Just last week, they approved $110,000 to be given back to the taxpayer. Plus, they did have the ability to take up to 2.5% of their surplus, and they chose not to do that. So I think it's incorrect to characterize the school board in that manner.
Okay, thank you. All right, what would be the, let's see, I'm trying to think, when would you want to schedule that? Do you think would be a good idea?
Well, I was thinking perhaps a week from tomorrow, or a week from today, the 4th or the 5th.
As a representative of the Calix Ambulance Board, we have a budget meeting next Monday night.
On Monday.
Tuesday night I'm fine.
What time is that?
It's at 6.
At 6.
Yeah.
Might be a little tight to meet at 4:30 and then get over there.
So
for
Tuesday
6.
would be okay. if that's-
Tuesday, as long as this doesn't go too late.
Okay.
I'd have to be at 7.
Tuesday is going to be well, I don't know, is it going to be a planning board meeting?
No, this is a work session.
I don't have my
I
Karen?
believe you're not meeting till the 12th.
Budget committee meeting, Tuesday night,
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
we
budget
do have that,
committee.
sorry.
4 to 6.
Yeah.
So can we make it Wednesday or so?
Okay,
Okay, what else?
Wednesday, you're gone,
Wednesday, I have
Yeah.
grant.
so, but Thursday you'll be back,
Is that too late for Paul?
Thursday the 7th.
Gonna
I
do-
don't know what the deadline is. Do you know, Chief?
I don't know today. I knew it was about 2 weeks, but I don't think
weeks,
next,
okay.
next Thursday, you said?
Thursday, would
The 7th?
Thursday the 7th, would still be in the framework?
I'm good.
All right, Thursday the 7th,
I think I'm okay that day.
all right.
I forgot to
I
call
have no idea, but, okay, you're gonna send me an email, right? Fred?
Chris?
Fred, I'm not here Thursday, I'm at the NHMA conference.
Okay. We'll just set up a recording device, okay? It's just a work session.
All right. All right, good, Thursday then.
At 4 o'clock?
It has to be 4:35, so otherwise I'm not there. And if we can keep it, I mean, I have to bail about 7 on that night too.
Is this Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. On the 7th.
4:35,
4:35 work session.
yep.
And that'll be at the, over
Town
at the
office,
town
yeah.
office.
Yep. Okay. What's that, what's the date?
7th.
7th, okay. All right, so.
More
Okay.
town managers report.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Mount Eustace Ski Group apparently has been able to place insurance. It looks like coverage will begin on November 15th. So we're looking towards a November 15th date for their lease to take effect. It's been reviewed by council and only some minor changes at this point, so we'll keep you posted on that.
Fred, is it the $1 million? Or is
Yes.
it the
A million, yep,
Okay.
single and 2 million in the aggregate.
Okay.
So if they get a date when they're gonna actually,
No.
not yet? Okay.
I think they have a date that they want to start construction, and that is
Okay.
as soon after the 15th as they can. The Parks Commissioners may allow a building to be moved onto site before then, just so long as they don't begin physical construction until the 15th. Had a couple year-end, almost emergency paving shim requirements. Became apparent that the plow was likely to do more damage this winter to a couple roads if we didn't do something, so we put some paving, some shim coat down on Slate Ledge and Grandview, something that we've been scheduling for a couple of years, but finally getting around to it. Town Garage Committee meets Wednesday night. There's a draft RFQ for the Town Garage circulating. Majority of the discussion will center around whether we want to go with a design build procurement process, or whether that's not necessary and we can go to a straight design build. The issue there is quality and cost versus cost. Certainly if you do a design build, you have a little more certainty on what the resultant product's going to be, but it can also cost more in delay in time frame. A design build is oftentimes used when a relatively simple construction project is contemplated. And I think this project fits more in the former, where we already have a lot of existing issues resolved with that site. And we have the access road, we have the utilities, water, power, sewer. Site work should be relatively simple. I mean, there's no unknowns there. So it really comes down to the building and what the building would be looking at. So, and that's something that may be, that decision may be deferred until after the first phase of the RFQ process. We'd likely issue the RFQ and then interview a couple of firms and see whether we feel confident that they are capable of doing a design build rather than design bid build. So if you have any thoughts on that, please get in touch with me. Last meeting, I mentioned to you that we submitted an application for a bicycle pedestrian grant that would remove the railroad ties from Industrial Park Road out to Reddington Street or beyond.
That was one we did on really short notice.
Very short notice, and they advised us that we were selected for their second round of the application. So while we certainly aren't guaranteed it, I think we're in a pretty good position to place and receive some grant money for that project. And we'll be working with the New Hampshire Trails Bureau because they have some money that they're willing to and able to commit to that project. The tree harp sculpture that I mentioned to you arrived in town this morning. It is currently in storage at the Bank of New Hampshire building, and with a few additional items, we will place it in the lobby and continue the fundraising for the winter in hopes that we will have enough money to build the pocket park, if you will, over in front of the senior center along the Riverwalk next spring. By the time you have the work session, if you're not in the town office before then, you will see it, and I think you'll be suitably impressed. It's quite a nice piece. The Safe Routes to School project is, after a brief hiatus, the engineer lost some staffing, which delayed the advancement of that project, but they seem to be back on track. They promised the preliminary design for November 5th, so I've reached out to the committee in hopes that we'll have a meeting that following week and push forward on the Safe Routes to School project. That will not only improve the sidewalk and crosswalk area in Union Street by Lakeway Elementary, but also redo the sidewalk along Pleasant Street from Oak Hill Ave to Pine Street. The pellet boiler is up and operational now. There seems to be a balancing issue with the fire department. They're getting heat, but not sufficient heat. So we've asked for the vendor to come back and see if they can balance that. I think the highway garage is getting plenty of heat, so it may be that just the control mechanisms, or when they're calling for heat, are delivering more heat to the highway garage when it should be being delivered to the fire station. Hope that we'll get that worked out. And I've also been asked to work on panhandling and pets and vehicles ordinances. I'm certainly open to work with any community groups or interested people on that. I just don't feel as though the initiative should come solely from my office, so I've reached out to those affected individuals in hopes that they'll step forward and we can work on that together. And that's my report.
One question about the West Main Street retaining wall project.
That will not get completed this year. Unfortunately, we'll have to encumber those funds for next year. We did not get the design finalized from the abutters until too late, and we're out of time at this point.
That's right. Thanks.
Any other comments? Okay, and so, there's old business. Yes?
Let me just say something.
Good.
You know, since you haven't done it this year, any consideration to reconsider putting that sidewalk on the other side of the street? save a lot of problems. You don't have to be fighting with or arguing with the person that you're trying to get permission to do things. I know we have to. It's a lot of light and power. But if you put it on the other side of the street, it's all flat as a pancake. You don't have to, you wouldn't have to put in as much money into it. Just something to consider.
Well, Selectman Seymour brought that up at the initial time, and we looked at it, and it came down to a cost issue. It is actually cheaper to rebuild that section than it is to reconstruct entirely new sidewalk on the other side.
Thank you, I shut up.
All right. I don't believe it, but okay. All right. Let's see, under old business. What have we got, anything? Margie?
I don't think I have any old business. Do you have any that I'm supposed to have?
Nope. New business, and that would be Karen.
It's that time of year again, where I ask the selectmen if they would decide to offer leave time buyout or leave time reduction to the liabilities that the town has on their records for the leave time that people have on their accruals. There are certain departments that either have been short-staffed or had changes in staff that put them in a position where they couldn't take some time off. And currently, the non-union personnel policy offers 80% at any time during the year. But this is the once-a-year time where I ask the selectmen if they'll do the 100%. The money is setting aside from last year to the tune of $239,000 that we have to set aside for those liabilities because they are included, they're due the employee. By getting rid of some of this leave time, we're going to save in some of the departments some overtime because as we get close to the end of the year, people scramble to try to use up their leave time, and then we're left trying to fill shifts, especially in the fire department and the police department. So in both union contracts, we do have this ability in November that the selectmen can decide to offer the leave time buyout. And I need to let the employees know, usually right around the first week of November, so they get an opportunity to do this and eliminate some of their leave time on the accruals.
Has it been a whole year since we talked about this?
Yes.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yes, and it's been 3 years since it's been approved.
So I'm sorry, Mel.
Go ahead.
Last year, what did we do?
You did not approve it because
And
we
part of the
offered.
reason was part of the reason was that there was a particular employee who had just given up leave time at 80%, and it seemed kind of unfair to then turn around and just like a week and a half later and say now we're doing it at 100%. Do we have a situation like that this year?
No.
Has anybody taken 80%?
Yes.
But when?
Some of them throughout the different times of
In the
year
last
have.
2 months, has anybody taken 80%?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Let me ask, the year before that, and the year before that, when it was not approved either, was that the same issue?
The issue, we offered it at 80%. If people wanted it, they could take it at 80%.
We didn't offer 100%
No.
prior to last year. Last year was the first year we offered
Okay.
it at 100%, I think.
No,
They didn't.
many years ago, part of this policy has been in effect. Originally, I think it was 2007. And every year, for many years, it was offered
At 100%?
at 100%, just in November.
Just outside of my municipal memory.
Mine too.
Up until a couple of years ago, and I don't, changes of selectmen and so on, different thoughts of whether people should use their leave time or not. It does make it hard this time of year in departments that have scheduled employees because they have to fill those schedules, and some of them may be overtime, some might be call company to fill those slots where people take time off.
Well, let's do something different this year. let's approve a time period for 100% buyout. Are you all right about trying that this year?
I had one other question regarding the retirement fund. You made mention to an implication to the retirement fund. Could you just walk through that very quickly?
Every year that I have to accrue this, I have to adjust the retirement calculation. I have to adjust for wage increases. So every year, that number can grow that we need to keep the money aside for. I remember years that it was under 200,000 when we were offering the 100% just to get it off the records and get it paid out, reducing what is carried over every year. So every time the retirement system goes up on their rate or there's raises, that number increases. That's why we offer it. It increases in relation to that.
Okay.
So when we offered the 80%, it was an effort to try to get the cost down and that expense down because the retirement had increased so dramatically in that year that was offered.
So what's the logic of having 80% and not just having 100%?
Because it does save the town some money if somebody wants to take it any time during the year. This is only offered in November. You can extend it to December for this year if you wanted to do it November and December, but it's only looked at and reviewed in November. The rest of the year, people don't get an opportunity to buy it at an 80%, 100%. They get the 80. The town saves money getting it, giving it to them at the 80. They get it when they need it most. Those are some of the benefits of doing the 80%. Because there's no requirement for them to maintain as large of amount on the records as what there is in this 100%. They have to maintain 80 hours or 2 weeks worth of accrued time. The other one, they have to maintain 40.
Is any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the month of November to allow Karen to offer 100% leave time buyout.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, done.
So point of clarification, that is just for the month of November?
Yes,
not
just
for
1 month.
December.
And then it goes back to the 80% that we already had approved, right?
Did we have this last year? This is a very nice write-up. I just don't recall seeing this.
I can't remember if I wrote something
Okay,
or not.
this is good. Thank you.
Actually, I think Fred helped with that too.
That's good.
All right. Now we've got the Budget Committee alternate member appointment discussion.
Since Mr. Kelly, Chairman of the Budget Committee, isn't here, he came to me at the last Budget Committee meeting and said, while he doesn't have any resignations at this point, there are a couple of members that, for medical or other reasons, may not be attending some of the meetings. And he does not have any alternate members on the Budget Committee. And gave me the Mrs. Copenhaver's letter of interest and suggested that you might want to appoint an alternate to the Budget Committee.
I have an update. One of the members, permanent members of the committee, has stepped off.
Okay, I have not been advised of that.
Yeah, Steve mentioned that to me last week. The other person called tonight, was looking for where the meeting was being held. She wasn't sure, she just got back in town. So, but I believe, from what Steve told me, Mrs. Copenhagen would be replacing the person who has stepped off, who is Stan Furman. That's what I was told last week at this time. So it's in this case maybe not an alternate, but a replacement for the last one.
And do we want to then recruit an alternate or a couple of alternates, just to be on the safe side?
Well, the Budget Committee is pretty good sized right now, isn't it? Isn't it nine? It's 9 members, and it previously was only 7 members. So even if 2 people are not there,
right, you've got 7.
You still have a Budget Committee that's the size that it normally was.
Well, that's the reason why we went to 9, is that way you can have 7.
So,
Well, the other reason we went to 9 is we wanted to make sure we had
some balance.
some balance there, and so it wouldn't be either rubber stamping in one direction or the other. I had.
So it seems like we have two issues. One issue is, do we want to leave the budget committee size at 9? Are we okay with it going down to 7 through attrition? That's one issue. The other issue is whether we have it at 9 or whether we have it at 7. Are we going to now establish a policy of having alternates on the budget committee? Because that's different than what we've been doing. And then the third issue, so sorry, there are 3 issues. The third issue is, if we're going to look for people to replace anybody on the budget committee, we really should put it out. We should advertise it and let people who might have an interest, let us know that they're interested. So while I appreciate Muffy Copenhaver's letter of interest, I think that we should treat it as a letter of interest and not as an invitation for us to appoint somebody tonight.
Yeah, I would like to keep it at 9 for the balance issue and also for the absenteeism issue. But Mrs. Copenhaver had attended one meeting. I guess that doesn't mean anything one way or the other. It was only the introductory meeting that they had last week.
Well,
So
it seems to me that an alternate would have to attend all meetings
Anyway,
in order to understand what's going on. I mean, it's, the budget committee is I mean, maybe unfortunately, but it's sort of an intense burst of activity over a fairly brief period of time. And if you don't attend the meetings, then you really sort of don't know what's going on. So the only way an alternate would be helpful is if they were able to step into somebody else's shoes, not just fill it, not just keep a seat warm for a night.
and again, I don't believe, Fred needs to be updated on this, but I believe this is an actual replacement, not an alternate, but a replacement of a person who has stepped off. But I guess maybe we need to talk to Steve about that. So.
Okay, well, why don't we get some sort of definite statement from Steve, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'd like to know if there's a resignation
We can
on the
handle
committee.
that.
I'd like to have that. An email is fine, but if there's some.
We can handle that on November 7th as well.
And I think that if there's somebody that knows that they're not going to be able to attend a lot of meetings during the budgeting season, you know, they maybe ought to get off the committee and let somebody who can be there get on.
I think last week, Fred, there were 8 there, weren't there? 7 of the 9 were there.
7.
Oh, no, sorry, 8, if you counted Mrs. Copenhaver, at least there were 8 people there.
All right, so we'll be handling that on the 7th as well. Okay, other business? None? None? Okay, now are we going into non-public?
I don't have any reason to.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
There's a second motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.